these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the WION VOA co-production. I'm your host, Susan Tehrani, coming to you live from New York City. We begin with a look at the first ever summit between the leaders of Japan, the United States, and the Philippines. President Joe Biden hosted Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. on Thursday, sending a clear message to Beijing to stop behaving aggressively against its neighbors in the South China Sea. Leaders focused on dealing with Chinese so-called gray zone tactics of intimidation that falls dangerously close to triggering a mutual defense treaty between Washington and Manila. White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakwara has the story.
Ramped up aggression in the South China Sea, with Chinese Coast Guard vessels deploying water cannons and performing other dangerous maneuvers on Philippine boats. It was a focus of the trilateral summit Thursday between President Joe Biden and leaders of two U.S. allies in Asia, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.
Any attack on Philippine aircraft, vessels, or armed forces in the South China Sea would invoke our Mutual Defense Treaty.
China's so-called gray zone tactics of intimidation, including ramming into ships, fall dangerously close to triggering the Mutual Defense Treaty between Washington and Manila. Marcos did not publicly mention China, but couched his words in diplomatic terms often used to target Beijing.
Facing the complex challenges of our time requires concerted efforts on everyone's part, a dedication to a common purpose, and an unwavering commitment to the rules-based international order.
Kishida is concerned with similar Chinese tactics around disputed islands in the East China Sea, called Diaoyu in China and Senkaku in Japan.
In the midst of compound crisis faced by the global community, multi-layered cooperation between allies and like-minded countries is essential if we are to maintain and bolster a free and open international order based on the rule of law.
Last week, the Philippines, the U.S., Japan, and Australia held joint naval and air operations in the South China Sea to deter Beijing, prompting criticism by Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning.
China is resolutely opposed to the Cold War mentality and bloc politics, and to words and deeds that make and exacerbate contradictions and undermine other countries' strategic security and interests.
Biden, Marcos, and Kishida announced new maritime defense deterrence measures alongside infrastructure investments in the Philippines and collaboration on global humanitarian assistance efforts. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News, Washington.
Okay, for more on this, we are being joined by VOA correspondent Jessica Stone. She's live at the White House. Jessica, good to see you. There were some economic outcomes of this visit. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the Philippines ambassador had recently said that they want to build on the recent visit of Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, who last month announced $1 billion in investments in Manila, especially in semiconductor manufacturing. There are already 13 of these investments. She wants to double them with this number. And so Manila really focusing on that sector and building on it. Also, we understand that Google has committed $1 billion on two submarine cable projects. These are going to connect Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands, which are part of the U.S. defense infrastructure with Japan and the United States. Manila also considering executing or negotiating a free trade agreement with the United States, specifically around this area of cybersecurity and digital technology. And another big infrastructure project announced yesterday, the U.S., Japan, and Philippines working to partner to connect Subic Bay, the cities of Clark, Manila, and Batangas. And we also understand that we have an announcement that the U.S. Development Financial Corporation, which funds a lot of these types of projects, is going to put its first regional office in the Philippines very soon. Susan?
And what about the economic outcomes from the U.S.-Japan meetings specifically this week? How do those figure into the broader Indo-Pacific strategy for Washington?
Well, a big part of the strategy is supply chain resilience, and you see that emphasis on semiconductors and digital technology and cybersecurity in the Philippines. Well, that's mirrored certainly in Japan, where they have a lot of the technological know-how that's needed to increase supply chain resilience. It's also a key pillar of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which is the economic arm of the Washington's Indo-Pacific strategy. Japan has now committed $100 million to develop AI and semiconductors alongside Washington, and the two countries have also committed to coordinate their subsidies and export controls in order not to get in the way of each other as they both seek to counter China in this space. Japan has also said it will commit an astronaut to the NASA moon program, as well as a moon rover made by Toyota.
Wow. Jessica, please do stay with us. I'd love to get your thoughts on our next story as well. The U.S. state of Ohio was long a solid indicator of American political opinion, choosing the winner presidential candidate in every election from 1964 to 2016. VOA correspondent Scott Stearns reports that Ohio now appears more conservative, presenting a challenge for a Democratic Party trying to re-elect President Joe Biden and keep control of the U.S. Senate.
For decades, Ohio voters backed the presidential candidate who would go on to win the race. The Midwest state became a bellwether for presidential campaigns, in part because it represents much of America, says University of Cincinnati politics professor David Niven.
Ohio has a massive agriculture base and a massive manufacturing base and regional economic diversity. So it voted a lot like America because its economy was a lot like America.
Ohio voters twice chose Barack Obama for president, then backed Donald Trump in his 2016 win. But when Ohio voted again for Trump in his 2020 loss, it signaled the state's shift toward more conservative politics, says Republican strategist Bob Clegg.
The foundation was always there for Republicans to become more dominant in Ohio, but I think the Trump thing just intensified that and made it even more so.
Voting is much more demographic based today than it was, even when Obama was in office. And those demographics, point Ohio in a Republican direction. It's whiter than the nation. It's less educated than the nation. It's older than the nation.
That's a challenge for incumbent U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown, who last won election in Ohio 6 years ago as a liberal Democrat.
Today, the hardworking women and men of Ohio voted to continue our fight together for 6 more years. You all showed the country that progressives can win and win decisively in the heartland.
This time, Brown is running against businessman Bernie Moreno, with Republicans looking to flip the seat and regain control of the U.S. Senate. Moreno told supporters that he wears his endorsement from Donald Trump as a badge of honor.
I wonder whether Sherrod Brown is going to wear with honor his 99% voting record with Joe Biden.
One bright spot for Democrats is how strongly Ohio voters last year rejected a Republican push to limit abortion in the state. Reproductive rights activist Veronica Ingham says the result showed that Ohioans vote outside their political parties.
Americans support abortion rights and will turn out to vote to protect these rights. Voters last night made it clear that this is not a partisan issue. Ohioans across the political spectrum don't want government involved in their personal healthcare decisions.
But defeating Ohio Republicans on reproductive rights may not transfer to this presidential race.
When you put core value questions on the ballot, Ohioans are mainstream moderates to liberal. They are not hardcore conservatives. But when you put candidates on the ballot, they reliably vote Republican. It's one of the odd incongruities of politics.
In this presidential race, real clear polling averages of public opinion polls show Trump with a 10-point lead over Biden in Ohio. Scott Stearns, VOA News.
We're now rejoined by VOA's Jessica Stone live from the White House. Jessica, presumed Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump faced a setback this week in one of the criminal cases against him. Can you bring us to speed?
Yeah, so for context, because there are quite a few of these cases against the former president, this is the hush money case in New York City, wherein former porn star Stormy Daniels alleges that the attorney for Donald Trump during the 2016 election paid her $130,000 not to talk about their affair because the president was married. Trump has pleaded not guilty to all of the charges against him in this case. He also claims that this is politically motivated. President Trump's legal team, though, has been really pushing to get this case delayed. That's their strategy with all of the cases against him. However, the judge decided on Monday that the case would not be delayed. It will go forward to trial on April 15th, which is Monday. This will be the first time in U.S. history that a former president is prosecuted criminally.
And on Tuesday, a judge in the state of Arizona upheld a near total ban on abortion procedures across the state. Reproductive rights are a key election issue for some voters in the upcoming presidential election. So how is this playing out on the campaign trail?
Well, that ban is expected to go into effect in the next couple of weeks, and Arizona voters are very key because they helped President Biden win in 2020, and so it's a state that all political observers are watching very closely. They will vote on several levels in November, not only for the presidency, but for a key Senate race that could determine the fate and the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. Also, they will vote on a referendum on whether abortion should be legalized, and so that's expected to bring a lot more people to the polls. We know that Arizona voters are specifically motivated by the abortion issue because 59% of them told a New York Times Siena poll back in October that abortion should be mostly or always legal. And in a March Fox News poll, 39% said the issue is extremely important in deciding their vote for president. Now, Trump has taken a position on this. He said the Arizona court went too far. So has the Trump-backed Senate candidate in that very important Senate race. Her name is Carrie Lake. She has also asked the state to come up with its own mitigating solution as quickly as possible. Arizona's Democratic governor, meantime, though, has criticized Republicans who she says backed the outcome of the overturn of Roe v. Wade, known as the Dodd decision at the Supreme Court, that she says put us in this position where states would make laws and not everybody would be happy. And that's certainly what we're seeing play out across Arizona. Susan?
Yeah, it certainly is. Jessica Stone, live from the White House. Jessica, always lovely to speak to you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Flights are canceled to Iran and Israel. India, U.S., Britain, Canada, Russia, and many other countries have urged their citizens to avoid traveling to West Asia. The Israeli military says it is on high alert, as U.S. intel suggests that Iran may launch a direct attack on Israel in the next 24 hours to 48 hours. However, reports suggest that Tehran has told Washington that it would contain its attack. It seems Tehran is trying to take a cautious approach, one that does not invite reprisals from Israel and even the United States. Washington's top diplomat Anthony Blinken has spoken to the Turkish, Chinese, and Saudi foreign ministers to make it clear that escalation in the Middle East is not in anyone's interest.
I don't have any calls to announce, but we have been engaged in a series of contacts, not just at his level, but at other levels too, to talk to foreign counterparts to send this very clear message to Iran that they should not escalate this conflict.
Germany has also joined in calls for diplomatic restraint amid rising tensions in West Asia. The German foreign minister reached out to her Iranian counterpart in a bid to promote dialogue and understanding. Take a listen.
These days, all diplomatic telephone lines are running hot to prevent a regional escalation in the Middle East. Nobody should add fuel to the fire now. No one can have any interest in a conflagration with completely unforeseeable consequences. All players in the region are called upon to act responsibly and exercise restraint. With this in mind, I also spoke to my Iranian counterpart today.
The Pentagon has said that a top U.S. general is in West Asia in Israel to discuss the current security threats in the region.
I understand it, due to recent developments, he moved up his trip to meet with key IDF leadership, discuss the current security threats in the region. But beyond that, I'd refer you to CENTCOM.
An intense line of storms whipped through multiple states here in the United States with heavy rain and tornadoes. The extreme weather caused excessive damage and